All right. I'd like to begin tonight by illustrating some things to you about St. Paul. He is a very controversial character in the New Testament. A lot of the New Testament was written by him. He did endorse the proselytizing of the Israelite nation. It does say that, but he did have some contention with the law, or whether or not the acts of the law were necessary for salvation. He got into it with the Lord's brother named James. He was also counseled at the Jerusalem Council in a book known as the Book of Acts, found in the book right after the book of John in the Bible. So you'll see St. Paul is wrapped up into a lot of controversial things pertaining to the church and ideology of Jesus, God, angels, and things of that nature. Now, dealing with Paul, we're going to start with the book of Acts chapter 9 and verse 1. It says, and Saul, that's what his name was before it was changed to Paul. It was changed to Paul in the book of Acts chapter 13, but it's another story. We're going to start in the book of Acts chapter 9 and verse 1. It says, and Saul, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went unto the high priest and desired of him letters to Damascus to the synagogues, that if he found any of this way, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound unto Jerusalem. See, any of this way is talking about the disciples of the Lord. If they found anybody that was of this way of thinking, any of this way, whether they be men or women, he was going to bring them bound in captivity to Jerusalem. So the next verse after that, Acts chapter 9 verse 3, it says, and he journeyed and he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shined round about him a light from heaven, and he fell to the earth and heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And he said, whom art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus whom thou persecutest. It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. And he, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what wilt thou have me to do? And the Lord said unto him, arise and go into the city, and it shall be told thee what thou must do. Now notice that's what was told to him. According to the scripture here, it was nothing additional, right? Verse 7, and the men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no man. Now this is the book of Acts chapter 22, verses 6 through 10. It says, and it came to pass that as I made my journey and was come nigh unto Damascus about noon, suddenly there shone from heaven a great light round about me, and I, listen, fell unto the ground, and heard a voice saying unto me, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And I answered, who art thou, Lord? And he said unto me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom thou persecutest. And they that were with me saw indeed the light, and were afraid, but they heard not the voice of him that spake with me. I just want to make a quick note. If you go right back to Acts chapter 9 and verse 7 and read, and the men which journeyed with me stood speechless, hearing a voice. It says that they heard the voice, but in this one in 22, it says that they heard not the voice. Peep that out. It also says here in verse 7 that they stood speechless, which means that they were standing, and Paul was the only person that had fell off of his camel, horse, or whatever it was they were riding on. Now I want you to jump over to the book of Acts chapter 26 and verse, let's see, we're going to start at verse 12. Whereupon as I went to Damascus with authority and commission from the chief priest at midday, O king, I saw in the way a light from heaven above the brightness of the sun, shining round about me and them which journeyed with me. And when we were all fallen to the earth, that's the key part right there I want you to notice. Remember, they stood speechless, so they didn't fall, right? Remember? Now right here it says, and when we were all fallen to the earth, which is a lie, I heard a voice speaking unto me and saying in the Hebrew tongue, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? Now it's mentioning that Jesus is speaking from heaven, the language of Hebrew. That's something also different than some of the previous verses.